All right, good luck, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Konkol. I serve as Dean of Hendricks Chapel and Professor of Practice at Syracuse University, and welcome to Matters That Matter. This is an online conversation series where we amplify intentional conversation about religion, about spirituality, about values, belief, and motivation. We invite our guests to share about choices made, difficulties encountered, and commitments solidified. This evening, our guest is Adam Lehman, President and CEO of Hillel International. Lehman was named President and CEO of Hillel International in January of 2020, after serving as Hillel's interim CEO and Chief Operating Officer. He's been a critical player in the efforts to strengthen and reinvent Hillel during his tenure, supporting engagement with Jewish students at 550 colleges and universities across 18 countries. Before joining Hillel International, Lehman had an extensive career in entrepreneurship and the technological industry. He graduated summa cum laude from Dartmouth College and cum laude from Harvard Law School. He was also a Harry S. Truman Scholar. Welcome, Adam, to the program. Welcome virtually to Syracuse University.
Brian, thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. As you can see, I have my orange behind me, so I am ready for a Syracuse-based conversation. And thanks for the beautiful introduction. I assume my mom made you say all of that. Much of it is true, so I appreciate it.
She's been helpful. She's been helpful. Thank you. It's the orange looks good on you. Thank you so much. We welcome everyone. Throughout this program, I'll have some questions for Adam and we'll be dialoguing back and forth. But if you have some questions, comments, whether you've joined us here on the Zoom webinar platform or whether you're tuning in on Facebook Live, please feel free to type in your questions. Our Hendricks Chapel staff will get those to me as appropriate, and I'll do my best to bring those to our special guests. So as a reminder, please feel free to engage throughout the next 45 minutes. Adam, I love to hear about professional narratives, about the twists and the turns and how people find themselves where they are, where their gifts and passions match up with the needs of the world. And your narrative is really wonderful. Before joining Hillel, you served as President and Chief Operating Officer at a venture-backed software and data analytics company, the same role with a crowdsourced creative platform. You served as Senior Vice President with America Online, founder of an early stage investment company, and now you find yourself as President and CEO of Hillel International. Could you please share a little bit more about these twists and these turns that brought you to where you are here today?
Thanks for the question, Brian. I assume it's just an obvious straight line. I'm kidding because my career is not for the faint of heart. It is full of twists and turns. I like to say, I've earned W-2 paychecks in 7 different capacities and areas of work. I've even earned a paycheck as a playwright, which is buried somewhere in there. I've had my opportunity to try on a lot of different professional hats. I mean, I will say so much of my career has been guided by a sense of where I thought I could have a positive impact in an organization and hopefully in the world. As a really quick recap, I started my career as a lawyer. I thought I would be following a career in public service, working in the government with my legal background. I frankly got a little disillusioned by the time I came out of law school about what was happening down in Washington, D.C., and whether that was in fact the best place I could be. And I had grown up in a house, with parents who had actually served as elected officials. And so in my household, the idea of business seemed a little, without the purposeful grounding of the law and of policy. And yet I actually found early in my career that there was an enormous amount, number one, of creativity happening within the business world. And I was lucky enough to find my way to this little company, AOL, that was the third of 3 online services at the time I joined them. So there was the opportunity for enormous creativity and innovation, and that there was the potential to actually change people's lives as part of the process. And so that animated really a large part of the early phases of my career, where I spent that time building organizations, trying to grow new companies, even some new social ventures, but with innovations that were all designed to make people's lives better. That was the theory, not always the practice. We know that number one, it's really hard to put together a product and a team and everything else in a way that works, and to do it in a way that actually serves what you set out to do, however high-minded or purposeful that may have been. I like to joke, this is a real aside, but in 2005, I actually started work with a young student at Harvard on a social network, and it seemed really promising. But of course, because we were trying to be so high-minded, our social network, which was called Carmen, which was to connect students so they could support one another in studying and learning. I picked the wrong Harvard student, basically. Really global impact. Zuckerberg was probably down that hallway somewhere. But kidding aside, having really been able to successfully grow some businesses and frankly failed in some as well, because that's just the nature of the game. I was in the process, this is now 2015, of starting a new venture. And I got a call from a recruiter to come join this organization, Hillel International, at that point as chief operating officer. And at one level, I said, well, how could I possibly do that? My whole career has been in this very different direction.
Right.
But as it turned out, number one, I had had such a transformative experience as a student at Dartmouth College, in partnership and relationship with a wonderful chaplain and Hillel director at the time, Rabbi Michael Paley. And it changed my trajectory. It changed my life in such positive ways. I first popped up because my grandmother had passed away, and just to be able to seek, that pastoral support, that was very powerful for me. And then I was able to grow my own Jewish identity through my continued involvement in Hillel. And then on top of that, at the time of 2015, I had daughters who were getting ready to go to school. So, the question of how they were going to find community, meaning, purpose while away at college was very much on my mind. And I had spent a lot of my time outside of my professional life invested in my Jewish community, in volunteerism and leadership, that I was very grateful to have available as opportunities through synagogue, through local federations, day schools, camps, and the like. And so my joke is that every night I would go to bed during the search process to join Hillel and say, I can't do that. And every morning I would wake up and say, I have to do this. It's just going to be such an amazing opportunity to invest myself in something that's very personally meaningful, and where I can try to help amazing colleagues like those who you work with at Syracuse Hillel, who I will give shout outs to throughout the night, because it's such an outstanding Hillel within our Hillel movement. But having that opportunity, and then the ability to try to use the skills I'd gained in the business world and in innovation, in so many other related domains, apply those. That felt to me like a really powerful opportunity. And I haven't looked back since. And my daughters asked me, one of the great gifts that many of us have had during the pandemic is a lot of extra family time. My daughters were supposed to be away at school in the spring, but they were home with us. And so you go around dinner table conversation night after night, coming up with new things. So one night they said, well, Mom and Dad, tell us about your favorite job, the favorite job you've ever had. And I didn't even take a moment to say it's this. I mean, it's just such a gift to be able to do the little bit that I can do to support, hundreds of thousands of Jewish students in the campus communities where we're present.
And as you mentioned, our local Hillel team here at Syracuse is just extraordinary, and their impact has been tremendous. And I wanted to take a step back, knowing that many of the people who are joining us this evening here on the Zoom webinar and also on Facebook are folks familiar with Hillel. We're already seeing some comments about our family loves Hillel. Thank you for this program, and we appreciate those comments. I'm wondering, for those that are unfamiliar, who might be tuning in from the foundation of curiosity, could you share a little bit more about what Hillel is, who Hillel is, and what it is that the mission and vision of Hillel is for this point in time?
Yeah, for sure. So descriptively, Hillel is the largest Jewish student organization in the world. As you mentioned earlier, we're on more than 550 campuses in 18 countries. Our mission is to enrich the lives of Jewish students so they can in turn enrich the Jewish people and the world. And to me, it's a very powerful and important duality within that mission, in that we want to inspire, empower, and support Jewish students so that they can both have thriving lives and have a sense of their Jewish heritage, identity, and community. But we don't stop there. We really take seriously then serving as a Jewish community to bring value to the broader campus community and the broader world. And so that's the mission. The way we go about executing that is we provide a really broad suite of opportunities for students to engage in, Jewish life, Jewish learning, Israel engagement, volunteerism, tzedek and social justice work, and just community building overall. And we're very much built around our professional staff. We have 1,100 professionals working across the campuses I mentioned before. They are my inspiration every day, watching what they do and the way they do it. They somehow spin 50 plates at a time, figuring out how to get dinner on the table for Shabbat for hundreds of students, often at the same time that they are, dealing with really serious personal challenges for students and being there for pastoral support and personal support, while elevating students' minds through lots of curricula in Jewish education and Jewish theology, other aspects of Jewish learning, while trying to be there for the broader community through outreach and volunteer. It's really cool. And I think I speak on behalf of all the Hill professionals. We're always excited to be in the place where we can support students. And finally, just as a sense of scale, we may talk more about kind of how we operate the organization, but part of that is measurement. And so we know that last year, we engaged more than 140,000 students across the campuses where we work. And of those, nearly 60,000 in really deep ways, where they were involved in leadership or immersive travel experiences with us, in deep learning, volunteerism, and the like.
I love when you were talking before, Adam, about, duality, and from that I can hear, tension and paradox, one of which that I find in terms of organizations, especially one with the history such as Hillel, as you're coming up to your 100th anniversary, in a couple of years, is thinking about the foundation of Hillel in 1923, started at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and then a year later at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I'm thinking about that historic mission of Hillel, but also this contemporary presence and that creative tension between the two. Could you share a little bit more about what you think as president and CEO has remained the same, and what has changed since that foundation in Illinois back in 1923?
Yeah, great question. And it really is informed by nearly 100 years of history. We're really excited to celebrate our centennial in just a few years here. Um, when Hillel was founded, the first phase was really to be a safe space. You know, people often talk about safe spaces these days. Back then, it was a legitimate issue and question for Jewish students on campus, where anti-Semitism was fairly present. To have a place they could go, it was very much known as the Hillel House, and a community where they would feel comfortable being Jewish, being able to express their Jewish heritage, their Jewish practices, and feel a part of that community. And so that's where it began. I will say, I'll talk about some of the twists and turns in Hillel's story, but that idea of a place where Jewish students can engage with their community, learn about their heritage, and be hopefully inspired by the values of of the Jewish faith and Jewish traditions, that remains to this day. Hillel as an institution then went through a few other interesting phases, and they're interesting in part because they accumulate to, I'd say, where we are today. There was a period where Hillel became known as, the place for religious Jews. Okay, you go to Hillel because if you want kosher food and you want to be able to have access to religious services every day, that's Hillel. And so that was a phase, really for a couple decades, that was at least the more dominant personality or theme of Hillel. As you move into the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, it shifted to where Hillel became much better known for its role within social justice movements, and a place where, as a Jewish activist, you could live your Jewish values, through your work in the community. And then as we got into the 90s and the beginning of the 21st century, we really started, I think, to embrace all those aspects of who we are and what we are. And it became really infused by a commitment to being there for every Jewish student, and really aspiring to be that resource, be that support, be that source of empowerment and inspiration. And to do that, if you want to really be relevant for hundreds of thousands of Jewish students, it means you have to be able to do it all and be a source, a place where Jewish students can engage religiously and spiritually, be a place where they can engage socially and with the social conscience, be a place where they can just feel a part of a community. So we're excited that, and again, I'll just say, I think the Syracuse Hillel team has done an excellent job of being, that wide experience and that wide tent and big tent for Jewish students.
You mentioned our Syracuse Hillel team, and one of the things that I know I've learned from them, and we at Hendricks Chapel have learned from them, is about how it is that we collect data, and how is it that we are mission driven and also data informed. And I think that there's a theological element to that, about how is it that we can protect ourselves from ourselves, so that yes, we can go with our gut, we can go with our spirit, we can go with our heart, but also we can go with facts and we can go with trends. And I think that there's something really exciting about your leadership and your background and this dynamic of being mission driven and data informed. Could you share a little bit more about the direction of Hillel, and specifically, and given your background and expertise around the use of data analytics, and how that's helping to shape and form Hillel today, and perhaps where you see it going into the future?
For sure. It's so interesting, I think, in the work you lead, and certainly in the work that we do. So much of it is of the heart, and that's so powerful when we think about how we can be led and informed by our hearts, by our souls, and yet it is also powerful to have that perspective, as you said, that transcends the subjective and transcends the personal. And having a wide view through data is just a wonderful way to It may not be a godly view, but it is certainly a wider view than most of us were ever privy to. As you said, I was lucky in that in one of the chapters of my career, I was involved in a big data analytics company that we created and grew. And it really gave me a sense for exactly what the way you put it. I love the way you put it, data informed. People often say data driven. Be careful. Like if you let the data drive you, there are a lot of cliffs out there that you may find. But data informed, where you're able to take an enormous amount of signals and try to, across them, get a better sense for trends, that's really powerful. And so, Hillel as an institution has committed itself to being data informed. We started with a small pilot of 18 Hillel affiliates who began collecting data on, just what are students doing? What are students doing? What are they thinking? What do they care about? And what started as, a small pilot now encompasses 98%. It's totally voluntary for our individual Hillel affiliates, but 98% of them have opted into this, what we call measuring excellence data framework. And, it is giving us the capacity to really understand everything from what students are engaging in and how they're voting with their feet to their attitudinal views, because we do survey work every year. We're actually the largest survey of Jewish students to really understand how their activities are also changing their hearts and minds. And then we're enabling ourselves to pivot and adapt really quickly based on what we're seeing in the data. And, it might be interesting to talk about that in a COVID context. The only other thing that I'll say on the data front is there's still a lot of work to do. On the one hand, in my old data analytics capacity, we could inform a decision based on like a millisecond fraction, because we had terabytes, literally trillions of data points, right? It was that extreme. We're dealing with a much smaller data set, and it's a victory sometimes when annually we think we get a really good view. But we're continuing to strive to get towards that kind of real-time data view that, for a Jillian Junie or Rabbi Joel or others working, on the campus at Syracuse, where they can say, wow, we're really seeing a significant drop-off in relation to Jewish learning. What's going on there? And then query student leaders and others to say, how do we adapt to make sure this remains, relevant and important? Or conversely, they can say, as they did last year, wow, we're one of the best Hillels in the country. We awarded them the Outstanding Hillel of the Year award because they were achieving so much. So that's our approach on data. And again, it's a data-informed approach.
I love a moment ago you mentioned the metaphor of being a big tent organization, which I find rather wonderful in this moment because of COVID-19, our local Hillel and many others are actually meeting under big tents. And I think about the unique moment that we find ourselves in, not just in our COVID-19 reality, but also thinking about politically and where we find ourselves. And what I really appreciate about your words is that at a time when so many are tempted to turn on each other, you're working about helping people to turn towards one another and to have, I have to say it, conversations about matters that matter in ways that are substantive, but also are sensitive. In some ways, it's about creating safe spaces, but also creating brave spaces that invite diverse perspectives into the conversation. Could you share a little bit more about how you in your leadership role think about creating those safe spaces and brave spaces where people can share who they are and how they are in a way that leaves room for disagreement in this context that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, it's a really important topic and a really important question. I'll start with a little bit of Hillel history. Hillel is named after a person, Rabbi Hillel the Elder, who lived a few thousand years ago. And part of the reason it's important to bring up our namesake in this context is if you look through the Talmud, which catalogs, an enormous amount of Jewish thought and liturgical interpretation, Beit Hillel, the house of Hillel, is prominently featured with Beit Shammai, the house of another leading rabbinic scholar of that period. And as the Talmud recounts in a wide variety of contexts, often Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai are coming at a question from very different vantage points. And ultimately, the Talmud rules that actually the heavens ruled that the law of Hillel shall be the law. And people say, well, but why is that? I mean, Shammai has wonderful rationales for all the positions that he and his brethren within Beit Shammai are sharing. So why is it that it's Hillel as the definitive law? And the reason why is that as a practice, Hillel always listened first to what Beit Shammai was proposing and always worked first with those ideas and then came around to share the Hillel perspective. And so that sense of even respect bordering on deference and humility, I think is very grounded within our whole way of thinking about what we do at Hillel. And so in modern day practice, how do we do that in a time when, let's face it, I mean, things are very tense, polarized, and politicized in the broader world, in the campus world, within the Jewish community, where there are radically different views in many cases around significant issues. I come at that question from a place of practice. I think there is an importance in our humility and kind of spiritual positioning of saying we know that every Jewish student, every student, has a sanctity in terms of their role within our work. So that's an important starting point, but that's unfortunately not enough. So from a point of practice, we have professionals who are engaged in really deep pedagogy to say, okay, if I'm going to have a conversation about Israel and the role of Israel in the history of the Jewish people, the role of Israel within the theology of Judaism, the role of Israel as a modern day Jewish state, the role of Israel within a geopolitical context, within a context of conflicts within its own state, within the region. How can I do that and architect it so it doesn't become a shouting match, but it becomes a place of investigation and a place of learning and listening? And don't get me wrong, we have not found the perfect answers in every domain, but I'm really proud of the commitment we've made organizationally to try to create, as you said, those brave spaces and those places where students really feel like they have an opportunity to not only express, but to learn and to listen and to hear others within the Jewish community, but also beyond the Jewish community.
One of the things, I want to slide in, I got a question here that came in from Sam. Sam, thank you for your question about the relationship between Hillel and local universities that they partner with. And I want to slide this into a larger question about health and well-being, that as all of us who are working with traditionally aged college and university students thinking about mental health in any year, but especially right now, could you share a little bit more about how you see the role of Hillel about health and well-being for its students and how it can best work alongside the universities that it's partnering with?
Yeah, I would start from where you ended, which is we're really privileged to work in partnership with universities. We view ourselves very much of the university. There are other Jewish organizations and they have important roles to play, but I think we take pride in being the primary partner to the universities where within the Jewish community where we're able to be present, and that means that we have to do that work in partnership. And this area of mental health and wellness is a great example of where that's in fact happening. We've had the wake-up call that I think many many people have, we knew this was already Generation Z, that was more challenged by feelings of isolation and specific challenges of depression, anxiety, and other mental health disruptions. That was before the pandemic. With the pandemic, it has become its own crisis and pandemic. Recent data shows that 75% of current college students over this past 6 months have experienced some kind of mental health challenge. 3 out of 4, 1 out of 4 have had suicidal ideation. I mean, it is epidemic. And so even though we would never pretend to be, a mental health organization or qualified as psychologists and psychiatrists, we also know that there are things we need to do to be there for students. And so for starters, we know that, for just psychosocial wellness, creating that sense of community and connection, it can be very powerful. So fortunately, like what we do and the focus of where we put our time and resources is in a space that actually could be quite helpful to students who otherwise might feel isolated or worse. So that's the starting point. But we also know we have to go further. So we've started to train every one of our professionals through a tool called Cognito, so that they actually can recognize more significant issues of wellness and mental health and behavioral health, and then provide appropriate referrals. And that's part of the place that the partnership comes in, which is, we make sure on campuses that we understand what universities are offering in terms of counseling centers and other supports, and work to really make sure students are aware of and able to plug into those resources. And then we look to be a partner where unfortunately, because this is such an epidemic, sometimes a student is told, well, we'd love to provide you counseling services, but it's going to be 4 weeks. Well, then there is a role for us to play. And finally, we're lucky to have really the largest cadre of pluralistic Jewish educators and rabbis, I think, in the world. And they are able to provide a pastoral level of support. And often for students, that can be it may not solve, certainly won't solve every issue in this domain, but it can actually make a big difference in the lives of students.
One of the things that I think is important for our viewers and others to think about is not just the questions about Hillel and what Hillel's doing, but one of the things we love about these conversations is we get to have leaders such as you with us. And so I'm curious about your own leadership and your own way of showing up in the world. How is it that you, as a leader, carrying so much responsibility, tend to your own spirit and soul? What does your own personal spiritual practice look like to build resilience and your own well-being when you're carrying so much responsibility for so many others?
Yeah, it's it's a journey and it's a challenge. We know in this moment in particular, all of us, and I'm no exception, are carrying the personal challenges of family, friends, communities that have been impacted by what's going on through the pandemic. I have really relied on a few things. First of all, from a leadership point of view, I try to be honest with my team and with our staff and our movement that, number one, I'm challenged by all of this, and that it's absolutely okay. And in fact, appropriate that they are feeling challenged and stretched and stressed, and may find times where they hit a wall. So I think that's an important starting point, at least for me, to share my own vulnerabilities, because Lord knows I've got quite a few. And then in terms of restoration and just kind of that sense of recharge, I do feel lucky that I've got my own spiritual practices to turn toward. I don't have, I had a fairly robust opportunity to participate in my local synagogue. It's actually a modern Orthodox synagogue, so they have not been, they don't do Zoom services and the like. That just doesn't work within that framework. So I haven't been able to take advantage of that, but I am able to study myself independently, to participate in some other Zoom-based, Jewish practices that, have provided me some sense of comfort. And then I'll do, Jewish themed meditation, frequently, found a lot of comfort in just meditating and creating space when I can, just to clear the head and reground. And so that's been helpful. I am a, unrepentant exerciser. Getting the physical side of, rejuvenation to me is just really important, almost to the point, I have to stop myself and say, okay, legs or hips or whatever, knees, need a day off. Because they have feelings too. And then finally, like also, and again, with that, I think apology, but plug into some mindless, this is more later in the evening, just, television and the like, just to be able to kind of mentally check out a little bit and let the whole, let my whole sort of mind and spirit recharge through that combination. So I can be there, day in, day out in ways I want to be, for my organization, for my family, for my community.
I appreciate that. We've given a couple shout outs to our local Syracuse Hillel team, and I want to do that again here when we think about Jillian and Joel and Jessica, Ronan, and the student leaders. They're tremendous. I think for those of us that are tuning in here this evening, whether you self-identify as Jewish or not, I think that we recognize that a strong, thriving Syracuse Hillel does lead to a strong, thriving Syracuse University and Syracuse community. Could you share a little bit more about how you think we can best support our local Hillel team?
Yeah, well, this is a great example because I think it gives, we say kavod, but real credit to a team that, and I'm glad you mentioned Jessica and Ronan as well. It's just a really terrific group of people who are doing the work on Hillel's behalf and as Hillel at Syracuse. I would also, just point out that it's important from, I think, the way I see it, the way they see it, that we start from a place of what can we do for you, and that means like what is the value we can provide our campus partners, so that I think that the welcoming and openness of a university partner to that conversation, that's in its own way, I think really valuable. And part of that too, I think, it begins with understanding. So when, like yourself, leaders, choose to really try to get to know who we are, what we're about, it honors us in such a deep way, number one, and number two, positions us to be in deeper partnership. And part of that understanding too, I think, and I know Syracuse University is among the universities that I'm about to reference, but I think our strongest university partners understand that we are not just for Jewish students. We are absolutely first and foremost in terms of being there for our Jewish community and Jewish students, but we take great pride in the fact, often at a Shabbat dinner, 30% of the students who are there are not Jewish. They're there with the roommate. They're there because they're curious. They're there because, they just think it's cool. They're there because it's free food, whatever may bring them in the door. We really love being a gateway into the Jewish community for the larger community as well. So, beyond giving us, the privilege of figuring out how to be helpful, that sense of understanding, I think it really, the only other thing I'd mention here is really that roll up the sleeves partnership, and where university partners give us the chance to partner with them, whether it is on working across faith-based groups or working across student organizations, in taking leadership when it comes to other initiatives on campus, even in the operational things that do matter around safety, security, fundraising, whatever it may be. It's really, we're always gratified when we can work in close partnership with the host university where we're present. And this is a time where I've shouted out our Hillel staff so much. I would give a big shout out to you, Brian. And we've heard such wonderful things from, all of my colleagues who work with you, with the Syracuse team, and also to the president of the university, and really it, I would hold the Syracuse University, Syracuse Hill partnership up as a model for how it can work.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and that really means a great deal. And I think one of the things I want to follow up on that is what I've really appreciated, and you've alluded to it, about Hillel existing for others beyond, shall we say, the Jewish community, and being what I would say is a blessing unto others, a blessing to me personally, a blessing to Syracuse University, but I would also argue the city of Syracuse in central New York. And I notice in terms of your documents and strategic vision and other places where people can read and learn about Hillel International, is this commitment to civic engagement, about being a gift to the place in which it finds itself. Could you say a little bit more about that priority of civic engagement and what that means for you and what that vision looks like for you?
Yeah, it's an important part of our work, and I'll be honest, because we're trying to do so much, I think sometimes it's easy for people to overlook the role that plays within the work. I'll just comment on a couple of the things we're focused on right now that are animating that part of our mission. Number one, we have a program called Mitzvot, and it's a play on words. For those of a Jewish faith, they may be familiar with the idea of a mitzvah, or in plural, mitzvot, without, generally anglicized without an E at the end. But when you throw the E on, it's mitzvot as in a voter registration drive. And so we have 180 campus Hillels with student leaders who are out not only registering students to vote based on the idea that, we all have an obligation to engage civically, but also rallying them around learning opportunities for what it means to be civically engaged and what Jewish values that can relate back to. So, they come to it from a deeper place. And so that's just, I'm really excited about that program. Syracuse Hillel is actively involved as an, anchor partner in the program. And, I suspect we're going to reach well over 50,000 students, many of whom are going to be first-time voters, hopefully as a result of this. We're also part of a service initiative called Serve the Moment, where we are committing this year to delivering 10,000 acts of service. And those are going to take all sorts of forms, locally, online, and otherwise. We'd originally been planning, to do a lot of service learning trips, outside the US. That's not going to be happening, but we are going to be very present with basic human service needs, health needs locally through hospitals and nursing homes and otherwise, and directly with needs on campus where, as you all know, often there are students dealing with food insecurity or other specific challenges. So those are two of the initiatives. Third would be, we just had a racial justice learn-in with more than 1,000 participants, looking at how we can play a positive role in honoring our partners of all different races across campus and again around the world. So these are core parts of what we do, and I'm excited this will be a year we do a lot of that.
I'm going to ask one final question, and before I do, I again want to thank you for your time, effort, and energy, not just for being here with us at Syracuse University for this virtual program, but for your leadership. And obviously I can say personally, I'm praying for you and wishing you nothing but health, hope, and happiness in terms of your leadership. And when we think about this particular moment that we find ourselves in, various pandemics, as you mentioned, and one of the things we've been thinking around at the university here in Syracuse is around the consequences of crisis, and that one of them can be clarity, and that crisis can give birth to clarity. And again, to go back to the title of this program, it can give birth to clarity around matters that most matter. I'm wondering about, as we close off here this evening, for our students here, as they are reflecting upon their lives, as they are questioning the direction of their lives, the direction of our country and world, all of the big matters that matter, I'm wondering, what are your hopes for them, and what are you hoping can become more clear for our students during this important time?
Wonderful question, and I'll preface it by thanking you for having me and for giving me this opportunity to share time with you and with the Syracuse community. In terms of matters that matter and what that clarity can be for students and for all of us, I found a few things. One, this is a moment that has made so clear the importance of family and community. And in a sense of blessing, we have been provided with special opportunities to bond with our families, with our communities, and never to take them for granted. So that would be thought one. Thought two is it's also a time that has emphasized and made painfully clear shared responsibility. We are all in this together. We all need to support one another across every dimension of human society and life. This is the global nature of this, and the way in which it has functioned, I think, has really underscored that in a way that I hope serves the young people of today, but all of us for generations to come, with just a greater recognition. And finally, and I think very beautifully, this has been a moment when we have seen just the incredible potential of people, the potential for courage, the potential for heroism, the potential for innovation, and just being able to reinvent everything we're doing in ways that still nurture and support people here and around the world. And ultimately, the potential for resilience. And I end there intentionally because my hope and prayer for you, for everyone involved in this conversation, is that we can be resilient. We will find our way to the other side of this crisis. We will be stronger for it, and we will all together create a better world as a result.
Thank you for those kind words, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for joining us to discuss matters that matter, and for all that tuned in, whether it's here on our Zoom webinar platform or whether you're tuning in on Facebook. We do keep these recordings on Facebook. So if you know someone who was not able to join us live, this is a shareable platform that we can share it after the fact with others that might find this to be helpful. So wherever you are, wherever you're joining us, we wish you all the best. We thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.